it's a real pleasure to have all the folks that we have here this morning. I am the regional president for PNC Bank here in Greater Washington. You're actually in our space here at PNC Place. This is a wonderful location. You would not have recognized this same building going back 6 or 7 years ago when it was a Riggs. Many of you may remember the landmark that we had here that was Riggs that we acquired back in 2005. But we're happy to be back together again, as Doug mentioned. And we're certainly happy to be the sponsor for this series going forward. And today we have Randy Clarke, who is new to us here in the region. I had an opportunity to meet Randy back in, it was late fall, maybe September, October. Randy's now been in the job for 8 months, so we're excited to have, has it been 6? I thought it was May of 2022 when you accepted the role.
Yeah, July 25th is day one.
Okay. Wow, you remember every single day, I guess. Yeah. All right, so 6 months in. But when we met Randy, we were actually at a salon dinner, and I was just struck by the energy and the passion that he has for transportation and the success of having a transportation network. And so today we're going to learn whether or not you still have that same level of energy, that same passion, and now that you've had an opportunity to assess what's going on with Metro, what are the things that we might need to do as we move forward here in the region. But before we talk about WMATA, I thought I would just talk about your background some. I saw that you joined us and you came here from Texas. My first question would be, because all things Texas, all right, if you're from Texas, forgive me now. Everyone who's from Texas thinks that Texas is the biggest thing, the best steak, the best people. And so my first question is, so Randy, where are you from? Are you from Texas?
No, I grew up in a small town in Nova Scotia, Canada. And how the hell I ended up running a transit authority in Texas and then back here is one of life's mysteries, I guess. But yeah, there is a Texas exceptionalism there to experience it. So you got American exceptionalism, then you got Texas exceptionalism, and then when you live in Austin, there's an Austin exceptionalism to be different than Texas. It's the blueberry and the tomato soup, right? So it's a unique time. It was a great place. We really much enjoyed it, but my wife and I, we're East Coast creatures, so we're happy to be back.
And how long were you there? How long were you in Texas?
4.5 years. Yeah, so it was a great time. Got 4.5 years during. The big thing in Austin was fastest growing city in the country, massive economic development, massive population growth. And then all the challenges of not actually investing in infrastructure and just getting a house in order. So from a transportation point of view, Austin had multiple, everything kind of west and south does a lot of direct referendum stuff, right? Like the East Coast style, right? There's not a lot of strong mayor, kind of strong governor systems. So they want to vote on everything from the stop sign to a referendum, right? Different style of government. Can you hear me, Mark?
Yeah.
I'll turn mine off if you want and just talk.
No.
So they've had several failed referendums on kind of building a larger transit system there, and they were failed. So when the board hired me, the mission was, hey, put a plan together, get the community to kind of support it. So we did that, and it was, I think it's probably still historically the third largest transportation referendum in the history of the country that we passed. It was a forever tax, and the idea was to fund a whole new subway system, multiple rail lines, bus lines, plus operating costs, all the stuff that we'll probably talk about Metro that wasn't financially set up correctly. A lot of lessons learned from the East Coast on how to set it up correctly. The unique thing we did, and something for this region, and I had a conversation at a group I was at, is we also included affordable housing inside of our referendum package, affordable housing at transit locations specifically, because that whole nexus of land use and transportation and how it all works together. So it was there for that, won that referendum, and then obviously got us through COVID at the same time. So beautiful place, lots of great people, but again, real happy to have the opportunity to be back here.
And how would you compare Austin to what we have here in the city? I mean, really, you're supporting a region, so it's really going to Virginia, DC, and Maryland. Yeah. In terms of the number of people, in terms of the ridership, like, are there any comparisons between the two?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a city that's growing and trying to be one of those next new cities of America. We are an established historic city, right? So different problem statements and different opportunities. So
we have a legacy set of infrastructure issues here, not just on transit. We also have legacy power infrastructure. Everything down there is kind of new, right? New is also problematic because sometimes you don't know how to actually do stuff too, right? And there's wisdom and part of that. So I would say it's not really comparable that way, but people are still people, right? And I think as more of our society has turned into what's in it for me personally, that is a unique challenge we all have. And so, Metro is that thing that ties this region together. When I went to the Washington Post when I first got here, a few months in, and talked to the editorial board team, and they're like, Randy, you got to remember, there's 3 things that united that, historic tense, united this region: the Redskins / Commanders, the Washington Post, and Metro, and you're it. And I thought that was interesting. They were showing humility that they were there. They were like, you're the last man standing. And I was like, oh, that's one way to put it. And so I think that's what I so love about what we do and why it is so challenging. Everywhere I go, everyone's like, oh my God, you have a hard job, but also it's this whole, congratulations or, my sincere regards, kind of like, but everyone wants Metro to be successful because there's no one in this room that doesn't realize the value of Metro. So a challenge there was trying to get people to understand if you're going to be a big mega urban region, you need this kind of infrastructure in a place that is, ultimate car-based kind of place. Here we don't have to convince people that there's value in transit and density in Metro. Here we got to get people to understand what it looks like to be that next version of Metro and what it could be in 25 years and what this region ultimately will look like. And so what I'm excited about is that this region is full of growth and opportunity. Like, we're not one of these regions that are dying in the country or just kind of getting by. I mean, and you mentioned Northern Virginia. Northern Virginia, it's maybe a little out of balance for the region right now because Northern Virginia is killing it. And I think we got to figure out how maybe the whole region could kind of kill it a little more, maybe more equally. But it's pretty clear that Metro is the underlying pinning of the region.
So Nova Scotia, can you hear me okay? I don't think my mic's off. So we're going to pass this back and forth to each other.
So Nova Scotia is where you were born. How did you get to the States? Did you go to school here? I think prior to you being in Austin, you were in Boston possibly, or somewhere in New England. So give us a little bit more about that background.
Yeah, sure. Okay, perfect, thanks. Yeah, I grew up, it's funny, I grew up in a town of like 5,000 people in a fishing town in Nova Scotia. So if you want great seafood and drink beer and play hockey, it's a great place. So I went to grad school in Maine. And I went there because I got a scholarship to go there. It was a Muskie School of Government, and no understanding I wanted to be in transportation. Quite frankly, I love politics and history, and I was like, I don't know, I'll figure something out, right? My parents were entrepreneurs, owned a construction company, so I went there, and I had a chance to do an internship at a COG, Council of Governments and planning organization. And there was remember those days back in the day where those tall ships would go from port to port kind of deal? I got asked to set up a transportation plan for one of those. Like I had anything I was doing. So I did that, and it all clicked for me that day that everything in life is connected to transportation. It was like an epiphany moment, right? And so then I got the opportunity. I went to work at a place called the Volpe Center in Boston, which is kind of the research center for the U.S. DOT. And I worked there for, 5, 6 years, something like that. And then I did a couple different consulting gigs. And one of my big clients was the MBTA, the big transit system up in Boston. And I got asked, so I was doing a lot of safety, security, emergency preparedness work. I got heavily into that area, use of technology and emergency planning and all of that kind of stuff. And then 9/11 happened. And then so I got really deep into that category. And so I got asked to go be the head of security and emergency management at the MBTA. And so I went and did that. We obviously, at the time, then we had the Boston Marathon bombing, so I ran security from Boston when that happened. And it was one of those, like, I've been just very fortunate to have great mentors in life and always just find myself around stuff that's messed up. And it allows you to
definitely found that.
Boom. But it allows you quickly to learn. And so when you're in a place like Boston, this would be analogous to DC. When you're playing in what I would call the bigs, right? Like Austin and Boise and other places, they're going to have issues. but the bigs, Boston, New York's, DCs of the world, big stuff happens and big consequences happen, whether it's national security or weather or things, because everyone's connected together, right? And so I was kind of involved in these things that I got a lot of learning quickly. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I did that for about 7 years. And I had a chance, I came down to DC, and there's an association here called the American Public Transportation Association. And for some reason, I was like, hey, I want to go down to DC and see how the sausage is made. And I had this great position. I was the deputy COO at the T. Governor's chief of staff called me and said, hey, we want you to stay. Charlie Baker at the time, great governor. I enjoyed working. But I'm like, I really want to go explore the larger policy and kind of the understanding of our industry that's not just pure operational and other stuff. Because I said, someday maybe I'll get a chance to be a CEO, whatever. So I'm down here for like about 2 years, and then the Austin opportunity came up, and I was getting recruited for a couple, and so I'm like, my wife's like, there's no way I'm moving to Texas. Like, it's just no chance I'm moving to Texas. And it wasn't even about the weather. It was pretty cultural. Yeah. The weather was number two. So then I said, hey, it was like the first weekend of December for like the interview, and I said, we'll just go down. Never been to Austin. I've been there once before. It's a super fun town. And worst case, they're paying us to go away for the weekend, and we'll go have a good time. She's like, whatever, but I'm not going. We're not moving. So we go down. It was like really gross weather. We left here, and it was something like 78 degrees that weekend. And we're big runners, so we ran the lake. If everyone's ever been to Austin, which is one of the best lakes running in the country, we're big into dogs. All the dogs are at the dog park. Went over to this beer garden and watched live music. And after 2 days, the next day's my interview. We just went early. She goes, hey, that's pretty good. And so anyway, it happened. I got the opportunity, and we went down there, and then obviously I got the opportunity to come back here. And that was the big thing, talking to my wife about this, right? Yeah. And it's funny how this all worked. So I had a 5-year contract. And we were just before the 3rd year, my board chair came to me and said, board wants you to stay, and we want to re-up you for another 5 years right now because we won the referendum. And I had a good setup. And he said, are you sure you're in? And I said, yes. He goes, you don't want to go back to Boston? I'm like, no. I'm not. And we love Boston, but running Boston's challenge. People are just nicer here. Problems are the same, but people are extra aggressive in Boston.
Well, that's great to hear.
And he said to me,
we don't hear that often about.
Well, Boston's like known as being like having the edge in Boston is kind of like a thing, you know.
I can see
Boston, Philly, it's kind of like
a little edge there.
So he said to me, so there's no other job you would leave here for? And I said, listen, there's only one job in this entire industry that I would leave for. It's occupied. I have no idea when that person would leave, and I have no idea if I'd ever get the job. And he said, what's that? And I said, if I ever get a chance to be the GM of Metro in D.C., I would take that. And Wade, he's my former board chair, is a managing partner of the largest law firm in Texas. Incredible, supportive. To be a good CEO, you need a great board. Yeah. And everyone in this room, I think, would attest to that. And he was supportive, and I remember I said, hey, I got to have breakfast with you. And he goes, can't do breakfast, but can I grab a beer after work? I'm like, okay, even better. So I meet him at this place, and I say, hey, do you remember a conversation? And he goes, what? And I started, and he goes.
Well, you clearly had to be drinking when you thought about taking this job.
And he looks at me, and he goes, you're going to be buying a few beers on this one, aren't you?
Yeah.
And so he knew, and that's the story.
Well,
but you know what? Very supportive. Yeah. And that shows you how this whole leadership and working with people and boards kind of the best relationships
all comes
work.
Together.
Yeah.
So you clearly like big problems. I mean, first you had to explain to your wife that you were taking on, you're moving to Austin, which she didn't want to do. Yeah. You're taking on a job here for the gentleman that was in the role before, was in the role for 6 or 7 years with all the problems that I'm sure many of us know here in the room. Was there anyone who tried to convince you not to take the job?
Yeah.
And why?
I'm a straight up person, probably to my own detriment. So I had some mentors in life that would say, I care about your career, and like you got to be real careful at your age. That could be a death sentence for your career. Mm-hmm. If that goes wrong, you just. And a couple people are like, we know you as a person. You don't know how to do anything except 100%. And you've been running 100% in Austin, but now you're going to enter the fishbowl, and you're going to go 200%. And from a life balance point of view, you're not good at that to begin with, but it's Austin. Like Austin, I was like the only guy that wore a suit in Austin, right? So like I'm pushing the whole city of urgency.
Did you wearing the boots?
Yeah,
The cowboy
my
boots?
team bought me a pair
You
of boots.
dressed?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll tell you, cowboy boots. I'm not really into the whole, but they are comfortable.
They are.
You can pick a pair of cowboy boots, never put them on in your life, and walk for like 10 miles and not have a blister. There's something magic about cowboy boots. But I never really got the whole thing about cowboy boots. And like I go in right to the shop when I first got there, and they're all embroidered with like really, state of Texas, right, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, cool, I'll get a pair and I'll put like a train or bus on them, be all whatever. And I said to the guy, hey, what would that cost? The guy's like, I don't know, 35, 4,000. I'm like, okay, how much are those ones over there? There's like $200, But yeah, so I had people that were like, it's supportive and like, hey, that, in our business, it's arguably the biggest job in the business, kind of in a lot of ways. Be careful, because we know how passionate you are and how you want to go. But then other people were like really, really supportive, saying, you're that next generational kind of person that will bring a different kind of lens, right? I think Paul in a lot of ways did a great job on the conditions he was given. My job is to build on what he did. The next person will be build on me. So yeah, people were honest, but also then people knew there was a personal element of coming back to the East Coast as well.
Sure. So let's talk about WMATA, because I think a lot of times when we think about Metro, that's maybe the central focus that most people have. We don't think about the bus system. We don't think about the police, the Metro Police that also fall underneath that umbrella. So talk to us about the construct of the services that are provided by WMATA, just for this room and for folks who may not know.
Yeah, well, first of all, you use the word Metro. So when I use the word Metro, it's Metro, and that's everything. And this agency and this region, to some extent, but so it's an external issue, we've treated bus and rail differently, to the detriment of the customers. This place has always looked at the crown as the rail system, and the bus system is just like bus customers, and that's not right, and that's not how I roll. So a customer's a customer's a customer. So, I mean, if you own a business, you're a coffee shop. If you buy a coffee and you buy a coffee croissant, I'm still treating you the same way. I don't care how much you're spending. They're both incredibly important. So the Metro brand, we have Metro Rail, obviously, people are the most familiar with, but Metro Bus, very large bus system, about 1,600 buses. Like we'll move 350,000 easy today on the bus system. Probably more. We're recovered much heavier on the bus side. There's routes that are running more ridership today than pre-pandemic. I did a call with our top CEO group yesterday. We're currently dropping the least amount of trips of every agency in the country. So we're providing the highest level of daily service per our schedule in the country right now, which is great. Then we have Metro Access. So a lot of people look at that as some individuals with different abilities getting around, so a lot of sedans or vans or whatnot, but a critical life and independent service for our whole region. Then we obviously have a gigantic construction, and then we have real estate teams. Some of you know our real estate team. We got great people on that. And then obviously Metro Transit Police, which is in a normal city or municipality would be considered a pretty big police department, We don't have full staffing on that, but right now we're probably about 350 uniform, but 500 total FTE for the entire police department. So yeah, it's a big operation. We're about 12,000 staff, and this year's budget is just shy of $5 billion.
Okay, wow, big responsibility.
Yeah, but
huge.
people talk about that, right? If you're gonna, we were outside talking. But I was talking to Teal actually. 18, right? Right. See, I'm into the LGW the year theme here. Unlike you, my year was this year. No, I'm just. But we were talking about it.
I will never make that mistake again. Trust me. Yeah.
But with that responsibility comes a sense of, to me, moving the ball and moving it significantly. So to have that much resource and that much on impact on people's lives, and Teal and I were talking about the use of just being transparent. It's the public's money. It's not Randy's money. It's not the board's money. It's not the staff's money. It's all of everyone's money. And we got to try to squeeze every ounce of water out of those stones to make the most good for the community. And so that to me puts me in this, like, I want to run Metro as business-like as possible, but it's not a business. But I want to run it with business principles, because for every dollar I can save that's inefficient, I can provide someone with a better trip. It's safer. We can get construction done differently, whatever. So to me, that's this whole premise of it's not just a service, but it's not a business, and trying to find that middle ground to really run the organization.
So part of the reason why you were selected for the job, you talked about the referendum that you had in Texas. So CapMetro was the name of the system that you had in Austin. There was a project that you ran for the referendum that raised billions of dollars for that system. When you think about what we have here, and this is what makes WMATA so unique, is how it's funded. And I think this is maybe the sausage, right? That's really difficult to really understand. So state and local government support, federal government support. There's fairs that I believe support 50% or so of the overall kind of operating cost. Tell us a little bit more about how that works, what you're working through, what the challenges are from a budgetary perspective. Are you going to be able to raise billions of dollars on behalf of this system like you did in Austin?
Well, why don't we start at the end, which is, the answer is yes, because there is no other option. There's no way this leadership in this room and this important region is going to let arguably the most important asset collapse. This region will not work without Metro working, period. I've not met one person since I've been here that doesn't believe that statement I just made.
Except for our politicians, maybe.
They all believe it.
Okay.
They all know
All
it.
right.
And I'm talking Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal. They might have a different version of how to fund it. They may have a different version of what it should look like. But there isn't a person that doesn't understand the value without Metro functioning properly, the region can't work. And it's not just about congestion. There's all a bunch of other topics that all connect to it. So the end game is yes, because I don't believe that $150 billion or whatever total assets we have, and then work that lots of people in this room and others did in 2018 to find capital money to put the place in a state of good repair. Then we spend billions of dollars to open the Silver Line to Dulles, a 40-year dream, and then we all decide, we don't have enough money to run it now, so we'll just run less stuff. There's that literally can't make sense, right? That'd be building this, I live in an apartment, but someone building the grandest mansion ever and saying, I have no money to heat it, right? There's going to be, I'm sure there's better analogy. There's a lot of comms professionals in here that will figure out the better messaging on that. And it's going to take everyone to work on it. So, yes, we're going to be successful. What was the start of that story?
Well, no, it was. I mean, when I think of Metro, when I think of WMATA as a whole, I kind of think
the funding and how it all works. Yeah,
exactly.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
Because what I was going to say though is I was going to compare the system to Amtrak, right? Where you've got a national.
Don't do that to me today.
Well, it's got similar challenges.
Yeah.
It also has a similar makeup in terms of its funding source coming from the federal government. It also covers the entire country, and you have success on some of those routes in places where you may not have success in other places, and therefore you have more support coming from the regions that you're looking to get support from.
Yeah, and that's a fair analogy. So what's interesting about Metro is we're like no one else. Like, there's no other transit system set up like us, not just in the country, in the world. So we're the only multi-state, and I'll just make DC a state for the ease of this conversation. We have a tri-state transit authority that also then is invested in by the federal government. So I have a board of 8 board members, 2 from Virginia, 2 from Maryland, 2 from DC, 2 federal government, and then they all have alternates. So I have actually 16 board members, but the other 8 don't participate unless the other one's not there. So the governance alone is kind of wacky, right? Like why not just if 7 people show up, vote? I don't know why we need all the, but anyway, that's been set up for a long time, and there are individual alternates versus for the partnership. So that's a little strange. It's all done by a compact that was signed in the 60s. So the bad thing about the compact is it's a document that LBJ and everyone kind of put together, I guess, back in the day. And most people, I think, would say, well, since the mid-60s, things have evolved, and you would have your kind of founding documents and models evolved since then. So that's the bad thing. The good thing is you kind of can't get out, right? So when it's all said and done, we have to go. So I got to go to a hearing in Annapolis Friday. I have a hearing in D.C. coming up. I have a hearing in Richmond. At the end of the day, Metro kind of just sends a bill. And in the compact, the jurisdictions have to pay for it, or the other ones, I guess, in theory, would take them to federal court for violation of a federal compact. But it's very collaborative in trying to work all together, right? But the board ultimately represents these jurisdictions and has to vote on stuff. There is a jurisdictional veto that two board members could say, like our state is not approving something. I don't know when the last time that was used. My goal is hopefully that isn't used and we're all working well together. So we are funded in this unique way. DC, being a strong mayor system, is pretty simple to work with in the sense of it's, DC, everything comes out of the Wilson building, it's paid for their share. Maryland is pretty similar. The difference in Maryland is it's kind of money that's proportional to Montgomery County and Prince George's, but it comes out of Annapolis. So, as long as it's in the governor's budget and it's worked through the legislature, it's kind of done. Virginia, it's a whole different ballgame.
I was actually surprised to see that Virginia has the least amount of support for the entire system.
From the state,
Right.
because the way it does, and Virginia reminds me a little bit of Texas, right? I mean, that's just the reality. It's a much more local
Well, I
style.
live in Virginia. I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, I meant just the local.
Our steaks are good, but
Yeah,
they're,
local control
Yeah.
versus like
Sure.
Maryland and DC are more the old model, if you will.
legislatively.
Yeah. And so the way it works in Virginia is like kind of make it easy. Half the money in Virginia is coming from Richmond and half from Northern Virginia, but the Northern Virginia half is then cut up. That slice is cut up into Loudoun County, Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, and then they have to figure out the different means to pay for their share, of which my general understanding is most of that is some type of property tax, but some other stuff depending on the jurisdiction. So we are the only real transit agency that doesn't have a dedicated funding source. So if you went to LA Metro, or if you went to Boston, so if you went to the MBTA in Boston, there's a penny sales tax for the entire state of Massachusetts that goes in to fund that transit system, plus some other stuff. So we have both a funding issue, but we also have I would call it a sourcing issue, because the lack of, the spread of ownership is one way good, but in another way it's not good. And that's what makes us so unique and especially really hard for finding solutions.
If you look on the site to do any research under WMATA, the last thing it says is no dedicated funding source. And that for me, I would have said, well, that's not a job I really want to take. So if you had the chance, I mean, what would be the system that you would create for funding going forward?
Yeah, I think it's important that I don't say what the source is, because that is what elected officials' job is to do, right? Like the easy thing for me to say is, hey, we need a sales tax. That's kind of cavalier for me to say that that's the method. It could be property tax, it could be excise tax, it could be a gas tax, it could be a combination of those things. I mean, there's no standard model in our industry. If you went to Seattle and they passed a thing called SB3, they did all of those things plus a carbon tax plus 15 other things. When I was in Austin, we had a sales tax and we passed a property tax. When LA Metro did their big thing in 2016, it was over $100 billion. They did it on sales tax, but that's across the entire LA County kind of area, right? So there's different ways to do that. What I do believe, and I do believe this, and I think it's my job to be kind of the truth teller on this one, is I have a report on my desk, and a couple of people maybe heard me say this before, from 1975. And it was like the Ford Foundation and some other groups got together, and it was about 7 months before Metro opened or something. And it said, I'm summarizing, but the very end says, if Metro's structural financial problem is not solved, it will be a disaster for the Washington region going forward. And everyone knows this has been set up wrong since the day it started. And there's been great work done to Band-Aid it over time. And it didn't matter as long as the thing kept going and going. COVID changed it all. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people go, well, what about fares? And that kind of stuff. Fares don't exist in transit to run the operation. Mm-hmm. There's no place like that, right? Hong Kong kind of has but it's also like mostly driven by real estate and then fares, and there's this other weird way it happens. But there's no transit agency in the United States that works that way. So to balance our budget on fares, like to take the train would cost like $80 a day. Right? It's just not, it doesn't work that way. It's just not fundamentally enough revenue out of that slice of the pie. But I would argue, like, when was the last time someone called the fire department and they showed up at your house if you're having a heart attack and you're like, yeah, I need $25 or you're not coming in. All right? I live in D.C. I live around the corner here. I have no kids. I want the D.C. public school system to be good. And I have no problem that my taxes go to fund that. So at some point, we have to decide what are collective society goods, and we fund them to work well. And I think the challenge with the sourcing in Metro is every person, I used to live here, right? Everyone says, Metro doesn't know what it's doing, doesn't plan for the future. It's all like basically what they're getting at is it's not strategic and it's not thinking ahead. Well, how do you get an organization to think ahead when next year it doesn't know where its money's coming from? Right? The other thing is if I'm a local jurisdiction that's tired of this every year, Metro going, hey, your bill's going up, then wouldn't you say, I'm giving you some of your own money and learn how to manage your own stuff? Because otherwise, this game's just going to keep going in circles, right? So we're in this little situation where Metro now is like no longer the teenager, and Metro is like this adult that graduated, right? And if you want the kid out of the basement, they better have their own money to and then hold them accountable. And I should be held accountable to manage our money, because otherwise, it's going to be every year, hey, you three, split the bill. Because there's no other way around it. We have to source this thing. And so I think we need a vision for what this place needs to be for the region for the next 25 years. So Paul and a lot of people did a great job in 2018 saying the system was falling apart. It was clearly falling apart. There was fires. It was bad because no one did state of good repair for 15 years. So that money was to put the place in a state of good repair. It is unquestionably better than it was 7 years. Like, it's just not even remotely close. Do we still have some issues? Sure, but we're trending in the right direction across all that, and the infrastructure better. The question is now, do we want the place to fall apart? So in FY25, we'll have a $750 million deficit. $750 million, right? So that the only thing I have to cut is staff. And staff means no one drives a bus or a train. So that means 25, 30, 35% service cuts. So a train every half hour and a bus every hour. Like, no one here, everyone knows that's not acceptable.
It's not really operational.
That's right. So over here is that. Then your middle is let's Band-Aid it. So let's figure out how to plug the 750 million gap, and that's the status quo. And the next year it's 780. But we'll just keep and just run that level. And over here, and we're working on this as a team that we're going to present pretty publicly, which is this is what Metro could look like. What's the 25-year vision for Metro? So a lot of you in this room, right? We're probably more fortunate people in the world. Have probably been to say go to Paris, and you go there and you're like, well, why can't our system look like that? I've been to Singapore, Hong Kong, all these places, and the bones of this place are set to be that. Unlike Boston, I looked after maintenance in Boston, right? The Green Line was built in 1897. There's only so much lipstick you could put on the Green Line, right? I mean, it's a bunch of guys dug it out with some axes, and then, it's not like they thought about fiber. Ours is all set up structurally the same. We should have platform screen doors. We should have beautiful open gangway trains. We should have trains every couple minutes. We should have we don't have a 24-hour bus network in the national capital, the richest country in the history of the world. How the hell does someone that washed dishes at a restaurant get home at night? It's ridiculous. Yeah. Sorry, but there's the passion. See, I got to watch myself.
Well, I like it. No, I was gonna talk about safety, but I think you covered a lot of that in terms of the funding sources that you need in order for Metro to be, ultimately to have some vision, to be able to plan, to be strategic, and to get ahead of those things. So I thought maybe I would flip to something a little more positive. I mean, you delivered the Silver Line. The Silver Line has been in works for quite some time. Silver Line actually goes from where I live, Vienna, McLean, all the way out to the airport. There were a lot of challenges in getting the Silver Line up and running. But what does the Silver Line mean in terms of, one, the execution that you brought and getting it done, and ultimately what you think it might be for the region as we go forward?
Yeah, I just had the opportunity to put on the show. So the team did all the work, and we put on a great show, I got to tell you. And if you're going to be a new guy at a new job, it's kind of cool to put on a show that big. But it's big for this region, right? I mean, listen, every time I've lived in this region, I've lived in the city. And a lot of people know the running joke around here. It's like, if you're someone asks you to grab them at the airport, and you're like, where? And they're like, Dulles. You were like, you can't fly international? What's wrong with you? Right? I mean, the idea of going to Dulles was don't make me. For city people, right? You're not that far away, so it was a little different. But,
I actually always thought that the Silver Line was going to be more productive for folks who lived in the city going out versus people who lived in the suburbs coming in.
I think, well, so we're
you
carrying
seeing-
about 25,000 a week right
Okay.
now, which is it's only been open for like just over 2 months. We're not running service at all to the level that's needed. We're only running a 15-minute headway on the Silver. We got to drop that significantly, and we're working there as we hire staff, and our 7,000 series trains are coming back. Today we announced more service starting today. So as of this morning, we're running 41% more trains than the day I started.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Like, that's a lot more trains, right? So we're moving in the right direction. And the staff's working, like, this is a dedicated, hardworking group of people. The Silver Line, though, I think is bigger than just Dulles, too. Like, Ashburn is a great example. Ashburn's busier on the weekends than during the week. And we have a lot of people driving to different stations than going to the airport. It's going to, like, by McLean. Look at McLean looks like you're coming out of, like, Dubai or something, right?
It's a huge
Yeah.
development.
And that's going to just
Yeah.
keep going, that whole corridor. So I think the Silver Line, but again, it goes back to, did we spend all this money and time doing the Silver Line to not run a bunch of service? Like, the cheapest thing you can do in transit is run service. Okay, like, so saying maybe the hard thing for other business, the cheapest thing we can do is every single train or bus we run, it's just variable cost. The fixed cost is where all the money's at, right? So we got to maintain, I don't care if we run 1 train an hour or 25 trains an hour through, say, McPherson Station. Those tracks and signals and power system all got to be maintained the same way. So every single extra unit we put is a marginal cost. We should be trying to run every just nonstop, safe ounce of service that we can through our system. And that's what the internationals do so much better than what we do. But to get there, you got to get your predictive maintenance program to the highest level, your technology to the highest level, your staff trained to the highest level. We have a chance to get there. And the Silver Line, I think, is, when I was out there with Jack, like, they're excited about that at the airport.
So you say the Silver Line of all the lines that we have, it's the newest.
Yep.
It sounds like you have, the data is all fresh because it's all brand new for the most part.
Yep.
Although Silver Line's been up and running for a while. The entire Silver Line, but out to
The other
Dulles
phase,
is relatively new. Is there a line of which, is that like the prototype? Is that the line?
You mean well, listen, there's a lot of people that want more lines,
Yeah.
right? Like
The purple line?
Well, so we have this challenge. Most people have heard of, like, we need another Roslyn crossing, right? Like the river. There's a misnomer, maybe I'll clear that up. It's nothing to do with the river. It isn't about the crossing between Roslyn and Foggy. That's not the issue. It's Roslyn, the Stadium Armory. Our whole east-west is clogged. So when we deliver our service plan, so in my proposed budget to the board, we doubled Green Line trains to Branch Ave.
Mm-hmm.
So an area that has the most need of opportunity in our region, we're going to try to drive twice as much rail service which is incredible. It's something like 28% increase in access to jobs within a half hour for people that live along that corridor. That's actually what transit's all about. We want to run more Orange Line service between Vienna and New Carrollton. But once that happens, that corridor is maxed out. Mm-hmm. So when we upgrade our signaling system, maybe we get 1 more train an hour, but it's done. So there's no resiliency at all left or spare capacity between Roslyn and Stadium Armory. So we need an east-west relief valve. Everyone thinks it's about the river crossing. It's nothing to do with the river itself. I think it just made it easier to visualize. So somehow we got to do that. This district bought a piece of property in Georgetown a couple years ago. People want to stop in Georgetown. They didn't before. Now everyone does, right? There's parts of by Logan Circle and areas that would be logical for one of the densest parts of the whole region. Doesn't have a metro station. Union Station, we're about to put billions of dollars into Union Station to be a national rail hub, and then have VRE and MARC trains run through, and all the Amtrak trains, and we have 1 rail line stopping there, Red Line. It clearly needs more activity. Lots of people want to connect National Harbor, right? If you're going to connect National Harbor, well, clearly you should go across the bridge and connect it to Old Town or into that area, right? And that's where we'd want to do it because that's where our rail yard is. Well, that's probably a $20 billion project.
Easy peasy.
Well, you know what's funny?
Yeah.
Well, here's another line people talk about since I've been here. Lots of people would love to see a connection between Bethesda, when the Purple Line gets done, to Tyson's.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's money. But here's the reality. I know, and I don't want to sound cavalier about it when you say $20 billion, but $20 billion over 25 years in this gigantic region of is not, it's not breaking the bank for what it could actually deliver for the next 100 years. And so we need to stop talking about funding, and we've got to start talking about investing. What do we want this region to look like? And that's why, you know, I think Chuck did a great job. Now Clark is there at COG. That's a chance to stitch this. You know, Jack's here, Board of Trade. We have all these people that all believe in the same thing. How do we create this vision for the DMV and what it looks like 25 and 50 years, and then start getting a coalition together how to build those pieces? Because there's workforce pieces, and there's technology, and there's, you know, recruiting, you know, big corporations and whatnot. But the underlying piece is your infrastructure always.
Yeah.
And we have a limited amount of time. This infrastructure bill that the president signed, it's already, you know, we're almost 2 years into a 10-year bill. And the way it works in our industry, you can't get that money unless you have local money for a match. So right now, so take the Bethesda Tysons, make it easy. And let's say tomorrow everyone said, that's it, that's the #1 project, we got to get that done. I have no local money to even think about going to the NEPA process to go get that, which takes years. So if we're going to try to get this money that's going to be in Kansas, in Texas, and all these other places, we need to figure out how to get our local money resolved in the next year or two to get money in that cycle.
So we really need the region to collaborate around that, right?
Yeah, the clock, I don't want to sound like,
Yeah.
but the clock
That's
is,
a very good point.
is ticking.
So I hate to be very tactical here because you're talking very strategic and we're talking 25 years out, but there's been an increasing level of crime that we've had here in the city, which has crept into the metro and all things WMATA, and I know you've been actively out in front of it. I know you're wearing a pin today for Robert Cunningham, who was the, you know, the person who stood in the front of an incident, and I'm sure we should all applaud Robert for what he did in terms of the person that he, you know. So talk to us a little bit about what we're doing around crime and what that means for Metro. What are the things that you put in place to help us get beyond some of those challenges?
Yeah, I will say last week, you know, I mean, this is a leadership group, right? So last week was probably the hardest day I've ever had career-wise, right? And I mean, I'm more than the bombings I went through or more than other things. We had an employee last week actively intervene to save a customer's life and then lost his life and got murdered on a subway platform. And I personally went to the house with the officers for next of kin. You can't get trained for that in a leadership thing. That's just, there's no chance I wasn't going to do that. That's what you got to do. We are looking after Mr. Cunningham's family. I appreciate a GoFundMe page was set up. Lots of people probably heard about that and got around. This community is stepping up graciously and generously to look after his family. This gentleman was going to retire, decided to stay more this year to work more overtime to get money for his last 2 teenagers to go to college. And so a lot of that money will help, you know, those kids go to school. I'm in a, you know, I'll be, you know, just straight up in the room here. It's a little bit of a rock and a hard place I find myself in. One is, I can't be like it's not a Metro problem, because then people are like, oh, you're being defensive and you're not trying to be accept any accountability. But then there's the also rational, logical answer here, which is it's not a Metro problem, right? It's American gun violence problem. I mean, it's not even debatable that America has a gun violence problem, right? We're the only country that 45,000 people a year die with guns. Right? Like Japan had 8 or something last year, and we had 45,000. So it's not, you know, and there's mental health issues in Japan, just like we have mental health issues. The difference is we have access to AR-15s and other things that they don't have. So, and I don't think this is, I'm not trying to be political, it's being factual. So we have a responsibility of doing everything humanly possible to make our system safe. So since I've been here, and I have a background in security, a lot of law enforcement friends and interactions, we've increased patrols 25% in one part of the day and 30% the other part of the day since I've been here. So literally, I have every the spigot on overtime. I have every police officer I have working unlimited overtime for the last 4 months. They're just, and I got every academy slot that we can get is full with the next class. We don't have enough police officers. With that said, police officers are not the only solution. We've had police officers in a station since I've been here where a shot has gone off. There's people in this community that don't care that there's a cop around and they're still going to unload a weapon on someone. I mean, there was a shooting the other day next door to a police precinct, and someone got shot, right? I think 4 homicides happened in D.C. on Saturday night, right? So no one is calling DDOT and saying, what are you doing on the street to make it, right? There's a shooting at Home Depot. There's a shooting at Walmart. There's shooting at churches. There's shooting at schools. We have a problem. So we've increased our patrols. I'm doing something with the mayor later today. We're going to announce a partnership where I'm having more MPD actually do some joint patrols with us, which is going to be real helpful. Something we've been working on for over a month. It's coming together this week. Other jurisdictional partners, we're trying to get them more involved as well. We've enhanced our video stuff, and we're investing a lot more in that. Something I did in Austin, we were the first agency in the country to do. We did it, I guess, same time as the one in San Francisco did. But I brought it here. We've hired crisis intervention specialists, so kind of social workers. We have 4 out in the system every day that are social workers, and we're hiring 4 or 6 more right now. So these are people that are literally going and engaging with people that need help. I mean, who would have thought a transit agency is going to probably need a dozen social workers, right? These are the things that we touch everything. So we are doing as much as possible, but it's also an open system, right? We're not supposed to be going to National Airport and going through security, right? But like another thing that really bothers me, in our country, we've valued different positions and different modes of transportation, and I think uniquely it's based on historic race and inequity problems in our country. If you assault an airplane worker, right? Like if you go on an American Airlines flight today and assault a flight attendant, there is a federal statute and you are going to get charged for that. In America, I have people like just like all over America, a bus operator assault is a big deal. This gentleman was an electrician. There is no national law, no crime, so that's something our industry is pushing hard for. We need people, we have systemic police issues in our country, and we have to acknowledge that, but we also got to hold people accountable that do bad things. And I don't know, I just feel like we're in Metro kind of stuck in because the only reason crime ends up on Metro, there's no crime that is because of Metro.
Right.
Like this individual last week, he was at a gas station down the street, waving a gun in the air at a gas station, went around the corner, got on a bus, and then got off at the Metro station. So we just happen to be everywhere, and that's how things kind of happen together. So I'm open, though, to any and all solutions that can get people that know ways to increase our safety and security. I'm open to any and all ideas. I'm with all of our CEOs around the country. We're stealing ideas from each other, trying to do that. But there is, I think, a difference between feeling unsafe and the data and the facts of being unsafe.
Yeah. Well, we applaud you for your leadership on that end. Safety and security is a really big thing for all of us who want to be on Metro and use all the services that you provide. That's kind of table stakes to start, so we appreciate your leadership there. I'm going to open it up for questions here, but I do have one last piece that I wanted to share because I couldn't leave this room without bringing it back to banking in some way or another. So yesterday, Jerome Powell was here, the Fed chair. We in the banking industry rely on his level of transparency to the market. It helps us understand kind of where things are going. I know you've also been a huge proponent of being transparent with the folks in the community. You're using social media. Is that working? And what was the underlying reason that you've been so transparent with all of us and the communities that you serve?
Yeah, I think great question. So, I mean, the short answer is it's the public's money. And the public gets to decide where it wants to spend its money. And I'm just another taxpayer. I have like a unique privilege of having this office where I go to every day to have what I consider, like you mentioned, big responsibility, but the best job of my life. Because I get to see, like I'm on the service every single day, right? I live on the transit system every single day. My wife's on the system. Trust me, if there's a problem, I gotta hear that. I was like, yes, honey, we're working on that. So, and I say that because like that's why every day there is nothing more than safety and security, right? Like every single moment I wake up and go to bed, it's what I care about. But the transparency part is truly it is the public's money. But the other part is the public's not dumb, right? Like, and I think Metro has done some damage to itself of being this organization over time that has not been transparent. you can't, like, it's not 1992 where you can just spin everything with an editorial board or something, right? And I'm not saying people did it in 92, but there was at least then, like, this didn't exist.
Right.
So, like, my first week, I show up, right? The first weekend, we had a big fire at DuPont. It was horrible. And I get down there, and I'm like, what's going on? And we screwed it up bad. Our response was horrible. I mean, to be honest, a couple people weren't there in week 2. I mean, it was really, we didn't respond well. We didn't communicate well. We didn't do a bus bridge well. A bunch of problems. I took some pictures of what happened. I put them on social, right? And people are like, oh, my God, what are you doing? I go, yeah, guys, there's fire trucks upstairs. Everyone knows there's a fire. Like, we're not running trains.
Right.
So, and I really believe this. And, you know, I want to be at the edge of naivety, right? That I think the public gives you more grace when you acknowledge you're just like everyone else. We all screw up. The strongest people and the strongest organizations acknowledge when you screw up, because if you don't admit you screwed up, you're never going to grow and get better. It's impossible. It's like, I mean, like that's AA or NA or all these things, right? I mean, if you don't acknowledge something's wrong, there's no way you're going to move forward. The challenge we have that many of you don't have is everyone sees our failings. So if you were failing at the bank today, you can you know, big SEC filings
for
a
a
little
little
different
while.
maybe,
Yeah.
but no one's going to dig in. What I think our problem in our world is now, and this is the challenge of being in public service, everyone was a COVID expert, right? Last weekend, everyone was a national security, should get a balloon expert, right? Everyone's a transit expert. And there's been a demeaning of public service and the expertise of public service because everyone gets on these. But all those people don't like if their stones were thrown if they worked at a bank or a consulting firm or something else. So to me, it goes back to civility, and I think the president was trying to suggest that last night, which is, can everyone just calm down, acknowledge no one knows everything, and just try to, like, we're all in this together. And if COVID didn't show, like, we're like floating in this little ball through the sky, you know, not to get too philosophical here, we're all gonna die. So can we just all work together and try to enjoy it while we're here?
Yeah.
You know, so.
I like
Sorry
it.
if that is a wacky answer in a leadership class.
I'm going to pass the mic around so Randy can hear your question, okay?
So I am so happy I got up this morning and came in town to hear you.
Me too. How was your metro trip?
Yeah. I drove.
Just go with it.
Because I wanted to get here on time.
I gave you the biggest softball.
I wanted to get here on time. But let me no, let me just say
Ouch.
that what the folks at the Post told you about what knits this region together was wrong. And let me tell you why I have that perspective. Because I was general counsel in the heyday of the Redskins when we won Super Bowls, right?
Yeah.
I served on the Metro board for 7 years. And I'm a former president of Leadership Washington. What knits this region together is Leadership Washington. Because we're everywhere. And you should use us and deploy us. I do want to raise a question of concern because I resigned from the Metro board when we had a change in representatives from Virginia and representatives from DC because it was dysfunctional. And this is not to put you on the spot, but you made reference to how essential it is for the CEO to have a great board. So I'm curious to know from your perspective, again, we can help you with this. How are you doing with your board? Is it strategic? Is it staying on point about what really matters? Or is it bickering and positioning and who's in charge and who's on first?
Yeah. Well, great question. And how about this? We'll get you back on the train. Okay? Okay, we're good. Yeah. Well, and thanks for your service that when you did it. And there's nothing I want more. I'm not a Commanders fan, but I'm more than willing to get on the bandwagon. This place needs a victory parade, right? Be good. So I will say this. Right now, I feel great with our board and staff relationship. I've had board members. I've been in nonprofits. I've been on boards. You know, I've worked with board members that are great and some that are not great. Right now, I have no one on our board that I feel is trying to upstage the board, the organization. Enormous amount of commitment, and there's trust and collaboration. I will say when I took over, that didn't feel that way. And then, this place has gone up and down. Like, I mean, some very public, but there was an issue, I think, a little bit between the board and staff on trust and collaboration, for sure. Again, I believe heavily on just being open, and there's no problem I'm going to have that's going to age better that the board should know as early as I know about it. And again, the more I do that, the more the board, I think, trusts me, and then the more freedom I have to do the operational stuff the way I think it should run. And so I think there's that feeling. So I appreciate it. I think Paul Smedberg is our current chair. I think he's doing a really good job of kind of bringing everyone together. He's not a dominant personality. He's a personality that tries to, hey, like, what do you think? What do you think? I think he tries to run the meeting, whether it's exec session or not, that way. Everyone's at the table. So I'm feeling really good about the way people are interacting. But I will say that the governance challenges, not only the financial, the board flips like that. And that is a serious challenge. So I just got a new board member last week. I have another one this summer that's supposed to be potentially that term's over, and 2 more could be just like that. And so you go from being here 6 months, and I might be a year and a half or a year in, and I got half my board different. That's, so there's you don't want someone that maybe is there for 30 years that doesn't change, but, changing every year or 2 is not healthy either. So probably above my pay grade to solve that, but right now, so thank you for your question. Right now, there's a lot of committed people voluntarily doing this work.
So just curious, follow up on that. How's it going to feel having Paul on your board as
Yeah. His question was, how are you going to feel about having Paul, he means Paul Wiedefeld, back on the board. So, yeah, I welcome Paul. I mean, listen, Paul should know this job inside and out, and he should know, I think, what a good board member would be to be supportive. And that's what my expectation is. So, yeah, I've known him through the business for years, so, yeah.
Welcome back to Washington.
Oh, thank you.
Back in the 80s and 90s, Metro was known as being safe, clean, and reliable. And we'd love to see it be that again. Wondering what you're doing about the so-called safety culture.
Yeah.
I was formerly a Metro spokesperson and assistant general manager.
Oh, when did you leave Metro?
93.
So that was pre-Dick White. So who was before Dick? Carmen before Dick. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, thanks you for your service. So, I mean, one, I think we got on the cleanliness, social behavior, we just got to acknowledge that in 2023, people act different than in 1992. That's just the reality. In 1992, 2017, if you drank a bottle of water on a Metro train, yeah, those days are over. And they're never coming back. Because you know why? Society doesn't want them back. So whether we personally want them and different groups of people are not okay with a 17-year-old kid getting arrested for having a piece of pizza. Our society is past that point. And whether that was right or wrong, I don't want to, because there's different perspectives. But so, and like, you can walk out in the street corner, you're going to smell weed. I mean, wherever you go in this area, people are smoking weed. That's not coming back. That society has now deemed that to be okay. And so that's a much bigger thing than Metro. So I just want to ground that there's a societal part of this. And I think what COVID did, it took like a little bit of the Band-Aid up and it just ripped the whole thing off. And I would love people to actually be like nice to each other again and respectful. But we've now as a region turned into more urban. Like what I mean by that is we're a little bit closer to like New York City subway, Boston, Philly than we probably used to be because those cultures have always been like that. And again, right, wrong, different. On the safety part, on safety culture, so you work there, so you understand this part. I'm a little concerned by that term by people that don't know what it means. There's a lot of that, right? Because it's an easy thing to say, but it's a totally different thing to understand what it means. So to me, safety culture is the culture I'm trying to bring, which is continuous improvement and transparency. Those are the fundamentals of any organizational culture. Acknowledge when you're good, acknowledge when you're bad, and when you can learn from it, and just be open about that. And this culture I'm trying to do internally with staff is, if you make a mistake, if you put up your hand and acknowledge that, I'm not into this discipline-based culture. It's very paternalistic. But if you hide it, if you lie, you cheat, and you steal, I'll personally take you down the elevator and throw you out in the street. And I had that same conversation every town hall, and almost everyone, I mean, they're all adults, everyone that worked, like, sometimes I'm the youngest person. And most everyone, and I say, is that fair? And everyone's, yeah. So do your job well. If you make a mistake, own it. I'll have your back. And I don't care if the Washington Post and everyone else is saying I should fire you, because they don't get to decide who works here. We'll have your back. But if you cover something up, especially a safety kind of topic, you're out. And I've had that with the union too. So I think that is what people really will ultimately lead to, a safety culture, because we are actually an incredibly safe system. So as you know, there's a thing called the National Transit Database. If you look at that, we have unbelievable safe system compared to most all of our peers. So you take our 7,000 series trains, right? There was clearly an issue. We had a derailment at Arlington Cemetery back in 21. Those trains, though, ran 400 million miles, and one part of one train derailed. And we grounded the fleet for a year. That's never happened in the history of transit, right? Everyone's had an issue. You figure out what's going on. The difference is we're in the fishbowl. We have NTSB here. We have so we have a different dynamic. We have to acknowledge what happened, fix it, and then also be able to kind of move the process along. But thank you for the question. Yeah, thank you.
Last question.
Randy, thanks so much for joining us today and sharing your vision. My question, another tactical question. I do some work with the DC Chamber. We're acutely aware of the challenges that workers face who aren't traditional 9-to-5 commuters. They're coming in 4, 5, 6, 7 p.m. and then working until 2 a.m. Can you address the issue of providing bus service that's reliable and timely for that segment of our employee community?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, and I probably got overly passionate with it, which is, we're not like a small town in like a part that doesn't matter. We're the national capital of America, and you can't get a bus at 2:30 in the morning. It just doesn't make any sense, right? Like, you would never think that if you went to London, right? So, the council actually just proposed a piece that they're kind of going back and forth with the mayor on how to figure this whole thing out. We stand ready to work with them once they decide what they would like to do. That's separate than the zero fare. They're two different things in the same bill, and people can debate either one. But I do believe we need to run more bus service. We need to run not only overnight, because there's a clear equity aspect to this. There's a clear economic development aspect to this. There's a public safety on drinking and driving and other aspects to this. So we need to think about the 24-hour part of the network. We also got to think, in this kind of big division we want to be, a better bus network. So right now we're in this planning process called Better Bus Network, and we're working with all of our partners. A lot of our bus routes are like the same they've been for 35 years. And then land changes and development have changed pretty dramatically. So, lots of places, if you went on and asked our customers, the number one thing they're all going to say is frequency and being on schedule. And what they really mean by that is reliability when you have enough frequency. So we need to also get to more buses that run every 6, 7, 8 minutes, or 10 minutes, or 12, and none of this like 20 minutes, 25. At a certain point, that's just not good enough for reliability of someone to live their life. Because, we got to get not only, I want to get people out of their cars to be, if you will, transit and car free, but we should also have a strategy that says car light. A family just has one car because they're using transit as well. So the bus is the backbone of a transit system, big time. So thanks for bringing the bus up.
Randy, thank you very much. Let's have a nice round of applause for
Thanks, everyone.
Randy and Jermaine. Thank you so much for this. Great conversation today. Thank you all for coming. Stay tuned. Our annual awards dinner, our celebration of leadership, is October 24th this year at the Marriott Marquis. We're honoring Pinky Mayfield. And we are going to announce soon a series on artificial intelligence led by Mahan Tavakoli. So stay tuned for that too. So anyway, thank you all for coming. Great to see you, and have a great day.